You ever spend decades loving someone, and one day realize they don't even see you anymore? That's how my story begins. The day my husband looked at me like a stranger and told me he needed someone younger. But what I said to him after that left him speechless. Hi everyone, my name is Margaret. Before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. Now, let me take you back a little, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about rediscovery, the kind that comes only when your heart has been shattered wide open. I married John when I was 29. He was 35, handsome, ambitious, and so charming that he could talk a tree into blooming in December. We met at a small-town library. He asked me about the book I was reading, and we ended up talking for 3 hours straight. I swear, I fell in love right there between the poetry shelves and the scent of old paper. For years, I thought we had the perfect marriage. We built a life together, a cozy little house with creaky floors, a backyard full of roses, and a routine that felt like comfort. We had dinners at 6, Sunday church, and long drives to the lake every summer. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. But time has a funny way of testing what love is really made of. When we hit our 50s, things started to shift. I noticed John watching TV a little more than watching me. I noticed him scrolling through his phone late at night, smiling at something I couldn't see. And I noticed that when I'd walk into a room, he'd stop talking. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself, Margaret, you're being paranoid. After all, we'd been married for 25 years. We'd been through worse. When I lost my mother, he held me while I cried for hours. When he got laid off, I worked 2 jobs to keep the bills paid. We were a team. That's what marriage is supposed to be, right? A partnership through thick and thin. But little by little, the warmth faded. He started making comments like, "You don't laugh like you used to," or, "You've let yourself go a little, haven't you?" They stung. I'd smile it off, pretending they didn't cut deep, but inside, I was bleeding. I remember one night, I put on my favorite red dress, the one he used to say made me look dangerous. I spent hours getting ready for our anniversary dinner. I curled my hair, put on lipstick, and waited for that familiar sparkle in his eyes when he saw me. But when he walked in, he didn't even look up from his phone. He just said, "Are we ready to go?" That's when I felt it. That quiet kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from one big explosion, but from 1,000 little silences. People think when you hit 60, you stop feeling like a woman, like you stop wanting to be seen, admired, loved. But let me tell you something. That's a lie. The need to be valued doesn't age. It just hides behind a tired smile. And as the months went on, John started spending more time at work. I knew what that meant. My gut knew before my heart wanted to admit it. He'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, with a softness in his voice he hadn't used on me in years. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because I needed to be sure. I needed to see with my own eyes what my soul already knew. And that's when the truth hit me like a cold wave in January. But before I tell you what I found, you need to understand the kind of woman I was back then. I wasn't naive. I wasn't weak. I was a wife who believed love could weather anything. I believed in second chances, in working things out. But sometimes you can't fix what doesn't want to be fixed. Sometimes love isn't lost. It's abandoned. I spent my whole life building him up, and somewhere along the way I forgot to build myself. I gave him everything, and all he saw when he looked at me was age, wrinkles, gray hair. He forgot that those lines on my face were carved by laughter, by sleepless nights raising his children, by holding him through every failure and success. So when he told me he needed someone younger, something inside me broke, but something else woke up, too. This is the story of how that brokenness became my strength, how one woman, me, turned her pain into power, and how the man who thought he could replace her learned that youth fades. But class, dignity, and courage never do. It's strange how you can live with someone for decades and not realize you're starting to lose them, piece by piece, moment by moment, like sand slipping through your fingers. That's what happened with John and me. There wasn't one big fight or betrayal at first. It started small, subtle. The kind of changes you only notice when you stop lying to yourself. I remember when he used to bring me coffee in the mornings. 2 sugars, 1 cream, just how I liked it. One day he stopped. Just stopped. Said he was too busy getting ready for work. I told myself it was nothing. People get older, they get tired. I convinced myself it was just routine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about coffee. It was about care. When someone stops doing the small things, the big things are already gone. We used to have these long talks before bed. About the kids, about life, about our dreams for retirement. Those conversations turned into silence. He'd lie on his side, scrolling through his phone, the glow from the screen lighting up his face, while I stared at the ceiling wondering who he was texting at midnight. I told myself not to snoop. I was raised to believe that trust is sacred, but every instinct in my body told me something was wrong. The way he smiled at his phone, the way he'd suddenly get defensive when I walked in the room. It was like living with a ghost that wore your husband's face. He started dressing better, too. Cologne, new shirts, even whitening his teeth. I remember laughing one morning, saying, "Well, aren't you trying to impress someone?" expecting a chuckle back. But he just looked at me and said, "You wouldn't understand." That cut deeper than he knew. And then there were the comments. Oh, those little comments that feel like paper cuts. You don't have to wear makeup around the house. Maybe you should try the gym again. It might help your energy. You've gotten too comfortable. Margaret. Each one a reminder that I wasn't enough anymore, that in his eyes I was fading. I tried to fight it. I dyed my hair, bought new clothes, even tried to surprise him with a weekend getaway. He canceled the trip the night before, saying work was too busy, but I saw his suitcase half-packed 2 days later. He didn't go on a business trip, he went somewhere else. With someone else. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I'd become invisible to the man I once thought couldn't live without me. He'd walk right past me in the kitchen, his eyes barely meeting mine. The house that used to be filled with laughter now felt like a museum. Quiet, cold, and full of memories we no longer touched. Sometimes I'd stand in front of the mirror and try to find what he saw, or didn't see. I'd trace the lines on my face, remembering when they weren't there, but then I'd think about all the years behind them. The nights I stayed up with sick kids, the mornings I packed lunches and ironed shirts, the times I comforted him when he failed, when he lost confidence, when he cried and needed me. And yet, here I was, forgotten, replaced by youth, by novelty, by something that sparkled brighter, at least for now. I'd hear whispers from friends, too. John's been out a lot lately. We saw him at dinner with someone younger. They'd look at me with pity, like I was some tragic figure in a sad movie. I hated that look. That's when I stopped going out. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted answers, but the answers came slowly, painfully. Every time he came home later, every time his phone buzzed and he'd step outside to take a call, every time I'd ask what was wrong and he'd say, "You're imagining things." It's cruel how gaslighting works. It makes you doubt your own reality until you start apologizing for things you didn't even do. One night, I made dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the works. His favorite. He came home, barely looked at the table and said, "I'm not hungry." He walked straight past me into the living room. That was the night I realized I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his background noise. I sat there alone at the table, the candles flickering, the food getting cold, and it hit me. This was what love looks like when it dies slowly. It doesn't explode. It just fades away until one day you wake up and the person lying next to you is a stranger. But I still wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was hope, maybe it was denial. But I needed to understand why. Why, after 30 years of love, of life, of everything, he suddenly wanted out. So, I started watching closer, listening, paying attention, and what I found next changed everything. You know, as I sit here tonight, sipping my tea and looking out at the quiet street, I can't help but think about how far I've come. A few months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing my husband meant losing my purpose, my identity, everything I had built over the years. But I was wrong. Losing him wasn't the end. It was the beginning of me. For decades, I lived for someone else's comfort, someone else's validation. I smiled when I wanted to cry. I agreed when my heart screamed no. I tried to shrink myself to fit inside a version of love that was slowly dying. And the worst part? I thought that was what love was supposed to be. But real love doesn't make you feel small. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear so someone else can shine. I used to believe that growing old meant fading away. That once the wrinkles showed and the hair turned gray, your worth somehow slipped through your fingers. But standing here at 60, I finally understand. Aging isn't losing beauty. It's gaining truth. It's shedding the illusions that kept you chained to people who never really saw you. John's betrayal hurt. There's no denying that. It broke something inside me. But it also cleared the fog. When the man I gave my heart to chose someone younger, it forced me to face something I'd avoided for years. The fact that I'd stopped choosing myself. That I'd been waiting for someone else to make me feel alive when, all along, I held that power. I know there are women out there listening to this right now, sitting on the edge of their beds, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there's still enough, wondering if life ends after heartbreak. Let me tell you something, honey. It doesn't. Life doesn't end when someone walks out. It begins when you finally stop chasing the ones who don't deserve to stay. You can rebuild. You can start over at 60, 70, or 90 if you want to. There's no expiration date on rediscovering yourself. It doesn't matter how long you were broken. What matters is that you get back up, dust yourself off, and remember that you are still you. I've learned that peace doesn't come from fixing the past. It comes from accepting it. It comes from standing in front of a mirror and saying, yes, I've been hurt. Yes, I've lost, but I'm still standing. That's the real power. Not revenge, not proving them wrong. Just peace. If I could go back and talk to the version of me who begged John to stay, I'd tell her this. One day, you'll thank him for leaving. Because when he walked out, he made room for you to come home to yourself. That's the bitter truth, sweetheart. Sometimes the people who break you are doing you a favor. Sometimes rejection is just redirection. The door that slammed in your face might have been the one keeping you from stepping into the life you were meant to live. And to every woman who's been told she's too old, too much, or not enough, I see you. Don't let anyone measure your worth by how young you look or how long you've been loved. Your worth isn't something that can be taken away by someone walking out. It's stitched into your soul. These days, I wake up early, open my curtains, and let the sunlight hit my face. I make my own breakfast, not his. I wear colors he said didn't suit me. I laugh louder, love deeper, and move slower. Not because I have to, but because I want to. And you know what? That's freedom. Not needing to prove a damn thing to anyone. So if you're listening right now and going through something similar, maybe your partner left, maybe you feel forgotten, maybe you're wondering if you'll ever be loved again. Listen closely. You will, but it has to start with you. You have to love yourself enough to walk away from what doesn't love you back. Pain is inevitable, but staying in pain, that's a choice, and I chose peace. My story isn't about revenge or regret. It's about resurrection. It's about finding light after the darkest night. It's about realizing that the love I was searching for in someone else was sitting quietly inside me all along, waiting to be noticed. So tonight, as I blow out the candle and head to bed, I whisper a prayer. Not for him, not for what I lost, but for the woman I became because of it all. Because she's strong, she's free, and she finally knows her worth, and that's the bitter truth. A few weeks passed after that phone call, and life finally began to feel normal again. The ache in my chest had softened, replaced by something gentler. Peace, maybe even pride. I'd started taking painting classes at the local community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. Turns out I'd always had the time. I just never had the space to choose myself. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there he was, John, standing on my porch, drenched from head to toe, holding an umbrella like it was too heavy for him to bear. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. His face looked older, more tired. His eyes, once so confident and full of charm, were heavy with something I hadn't seen in years. regret. "Margaret," he said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. My mind raced through 1,000 memories, the laughter, the fights, the betrayal. But instead of anger, what I felt most was distance. Not just physical, but emotional, like he was a ghost from another life. I stepped aside and let him in. Old habits die hard, I guess. He looked around the house. It had changed since he'd left. New curtains, brighter colors, a few of my paintings on the wall. "You've been busy," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I've been living." He sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where he'd once told me he needed someone younger. I could almost hear the echo of those words in the room. He rubbed his hands together, nervous, searching for what to say. "I've lost everything, Margaret," he started. "The business, the apartment, even her. She took off the moment things got hard. Said I wasn't the man she thought I was." I folded my arms and leaned against the counter. "And what man was that, John?" He looked down. One who had everything together. One who didn't age, didn't get tired, didn't disappoint. That hit me. Not because it hurt, but because it showed me how deeply lost he was. He had built his entire identity on appearances, on youth, status, control, and when those things vanished, so did he. "I don't know what I expected," he said. "I just wanted to see you, to say I was sorry." Again, his voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the man I used to love, not the one who betrayed me, but the one who once held my hand when life was uncertain, who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen. But that man wasn't here anymore. "Not really, John," I said softly. "You're not here because you love me. You're here because you're lonely." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "And that's okay. Loneliness has a way of humbling us, but you need to understand something. I forgave you, not because you deserved it, but because I deserved peace." He looked up at me, tears welling in his eyes. "So, there's no chance? Not even to start over?" I smiled gently. "We both started over, John. You just took a different road. And now I'm walking mine." Silence filled the room, thick but not heavy. He nodded slowly, understanding what I meant. He looked around one last time, as if memorizing the life he'd thrown away. Before leaving, he turned back to me and said, "You look happy, Margaret." I guess. I never really knew what that looked like until now. I didn't reply. I just smiled faintly and closed the door behind him. As the rain poured outside, I stood there, leaning against the door, breathing deeply. It wasn't relief exactly, more like closure. The kind that doesn't come from revenge or payback, but from finally knowing your worth. Later that night, I sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. My reflection stared back at me, calm, strong, whole. I thought about all the years I'd spent waiting for his love, his approval, his attention. And then I realized I had everything I'd ever needed right here. I didn't need him to validate me anymore. I didn't need his apology to move on. I'd already built a new life, one where my happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else's choices. The next morning, I got a call from Sarah, my neighbor. "Margaret," she said, "I saw John leaving your place last night. Everything okay?" I chuckled. "Everything's perfect, Sarah. Everything's finally perfect." And it was. For the first time in decades, my story wasn't about what he did, or how he hurt me, or what I lost. It was about me, the woman who had the courage to rebuild, to heal, to rise. Sometimes the people who break you are also the ones who make you discover how strong you truly are. And that was my truth. Bitter, yes, but beautiful. The morning after John left, I woke up to an empty side of the bed that still smelled like him. The house felt bigger than usual. Quieter, colder, like even the walls were trying to adjust to his absence. The coffee pot hissed, the clock ticked, and every sound reminded me that he was gone. For a moment, I almost called out his name, the way I used to when I made breakfast. But then I stopped myself. That chapter was over. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can share your life, your bed, your dreams for decades. And yet, when they're gone, the silence feels like they never existed. I thought I'd fall apart completely, but instead, something unexpected happened. The world didn't end. The sun still rose, and I realized I'd been living half alive for years, dimming myself just to keep someone else comfortable. The first week was brutal. Every corner of that house screamed his name. The dent on his favorite armchair, the half-used shaving cream, the pictures on the wall. All of it felt like tiny reminders of how small I'd made myself trying to keep him happy. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? How long had he been pulling away while I was too busy saving what was already gone? Then one day I walked past a mirror in the hallway. I don't know why, but I stopped. I hadn't really looked at myself in months, maybe years. The woman staring back at me looked tired, but there was something different in her eyes. Strength, fire, a spark that had been buried under years of compromise. I whispered to my reflection, "You're still here." That's when something inside me shifted. I started doing small things for myself. Things I'd stopped doing because he never noticed or cared. I went back to my morning walks, brewed my favorite tea instead of his bitter coffee, and started reading again. At first, it felt strange, like I was trespassing in my own life, but slowly it began to feel right. Then one afternoon, while cleaning out the closet, I found a dusty box tucked behind some old winter coats. Inside were letters, love notes, birthday cards, little things John and I had written each other when we were still us. My hands trembled as I opened them. The handwriting was his, but the words, they belonged to someone else. Someone who used to see me, really see me. Reading those letters hurt, but it also reminded me of the woman I used to be before love became a burden. I wasn't just a wife or a caretaker or someone waiting to be chosen again. I was me, a woman who had built a life from scratch, who'd faced storms and still stood tall. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. The air was cool, the stars bright. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't sadness. It was freedom, quiet, steady, and terrifyingly beautiful. But life, as always, has a way of throwing surprises your way when you least expect it. A week later, my phone rang. It was John. His voice was shaky, softer than I remembered. "Margaret," he said, I made a mistake. I didn't say a word. I just listened. He started rambling about how things hadn't gone the way he thought they would, how the woman he left me for wasn't what he imagined. He said she was distant, demanding, and that she'd started seeing someone else behind his back. Karma has its own way of teaching lessons, doesn't it? Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "You were right," he whispered. "I thought I needed someone younger to feel alive. But I didn't realize what real life was until I lost it. Until I lost you." For a split second, my heart clenched. The part of me that had loved him for so long wanted to reach out, to forgive, to fix things. But the woman I had become, the one who'd spent weeks rebuilding herself, knew better. "John," I said quietly, "you didn't lose me because of her. You lost me because you stopped choosing me." There was silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, struggling to find the right words, but there were none left. "I don't expect anything," he said finally. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and you know what?" I believed him, but that didn't mean I owed him anything. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. I realized something powerful in that moment. Forgiveness doesn't always mean taking someone back. Sometimes it means freeing yourself from the weight of what they did. From that day on, I stopped being the woman who waited for an apology. I stopped defining my worth by the love I lost. Instead, I started building a life that felt like mine again. I painted the living room, changed the curtains, even got a haircut. Small things, sure, but each one was a little victory. People in town started noticing. My neighbor Sarah told me, "Margaret, you look different, happier." And I smiled because she was right. I was finally living, not just existing. And maybe that's what turning points really are. Not some grand moment of clarity, but a quiet decision to stop looking back and start walking forward. That night, before going to bed, I looked in the mirror again. I didn't see a broken woman or a scorned wife. I saw strength, grace, and peace. I whispered to my reflection again. You made it, because I did. I'll never forget that night. The one where the truth finally stepped out of the shadows and stared me dead in the face. It wasn't loud or dramatic like in the movies. No yelling, no broken plates, no storming out. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy enough to crush you. John came home late again, after midnight this time. I was sitting in the living room waiting. The TV was on, but I wasn't watching it. I was just staring at the flickering light, rehearsing what I was going to say. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. He walked in smelling like expensive cologne, not the kind he used to wear. He looked different, lighter, happier. And that broke me more than anything, because whoever she was giving him something I no longer could. Or so he thought. John, I said softly, we need to talk. He froze. You could see the annoyance flash across his face, like I was interrupting something important. He sighed, set his keys down and said, Can this wait? I'm tired. Tired. That word hit me like a slap. Tired of what? Tired of pretending? Tired of me? No, I said. It can't. He sat down across from me, his expression tight. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't see my husband. I saw a man I didn't recognize anymore. I took a deep breath. Are you seeing someone else? He didn't answer right away. He didn't deny it either. His eyes flickered, his jaw clenched, and that silence, that damn silence, what said more than words ever could. I felt my stomach drop. My throat went dry. I think a part of me already knew, but hearing it confirmed was like being hit by a slow-moving train you saw coming miles away. Finally, he said it. Margaret, I didn't mean for it to happen, but yes. And just like that, 30 years of love, sacrifice, and history turned into a pile of ashes. She makes me feel alive again, he said. She's younger. She laughs at my jokes. She looks at me like you used to. I remember staring at him, trying to find the man I once loved inside those cold, distant words. He didn't even look ashamed, just guilty in a way that still tried to justify itself. Do you even hear yourself? I asked quietly. You're telling your wife, the woman who's been by your side for 3 decades, that you threw it all away because you wanted to feel young again? He ran his hand through his hair. You wouldn't understand, Margaret. You've changed. We've both changed. Oh, I understood, all right. He wanted excitement. He wanted validation. He wanted someone who didn't remind him that time was passing. Someone who didn't carry stretch marks or silver strands of hair. You think she loves you? I said, my voice trembling. She loves the version of you that you're pretending to be. The one with the stories, the charm, the steady paycheck. But when she sees the real you, the man who runs from loyalty because it got a few wrinkles, what then? He stood up, frustrated. This isn't about her. It's about me. I need to feel something again. And that's when I realized the truth. This wasn't about age. It wasn't about passion or romance or second chances. It was about ego. John didn't fall in love with someone new. He fell in love with the version of himself that she reflected back at him. The younger, invincible man he used to be. My hands were cold. My body numb. But my mind was clear, painfully clear. I'd spent years giving everything I had to a man who mistook my loyalty for weakness. I looked at him and said, You know, John, I spent half my life trying to make you happy. But I never realized happiness was something you could just throw away for a younger laugh. He didn't answer, just stood there, awkward, ashamed, and yet too proud to admit it. I guess you'll find out, I whispered. When she gets tired of pretending. When she starts to see you the way I do now. I walked past him, my heart breaking with every step. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My tears were gone. All that was left was emptiness, and a strange kind of calm. Because the moment he said it out loud, I knew something he didn't. He thought this was the end of me, but it was just the beginning. The next morning, he packed a bag. No goodbye, no apology. Just a quiet, I'll call you. But he didn't call. Not for weeks. And those weeks were the hardest and the most freeing days of my life. I started noticing the silence again. Not as loneliness this time, but as peace. The same walls that used to echo with disappointment now held space for something new. Clarity. Still, I couldn't shake his words. She makes me feel alive. Alive. Like I was some sort of ghost haunting my own marriage. That word burned in my chest for days, but you know what they say? The truth always comes out. And when it did, John realized that the woman he left behind wasn't the one who'd been holding him back. She was the one who'd been holding him up.